Hi everyone, welcome to this lecture. So in this lecture, we will compare Naïve Bayes classification with the logistic regression. The common thing is that both are probabilistic classifier. Let's compare them. Okay, so Naïve Bayes is a generative model while logistic regression is a discriminative model. So what is the difference between the generative and the discriminative model? So here is the definition. Generative model focus on explaining how the data was generated, especially the distribution to which data belongs to, while the discriminative model focus on predicting the labels of the data by drawing boundaries in the data space. So basically, generative model is more interesting about the distribution of the data, and it performs the classification based on the distribution. That is, it groups the data based on the distribution of the data. While on the other hand, the discriminative model just draw a boundary between the data labels. So here is the explanation of discriminative model and the generative model. So this is the general definition of the discriminative model. We see that a discriminative model is interested in order to draw the plane or a boundary in order to separate the classes. On the other hand, we can see that the generative model is interested based on the distribution, and it classifies the data or model the data based on how the data was generated and to which distribution it belongs to, especially the Gaussian distribution or any other kind of distribution. So the discriminative model just draw a boundary in order to perform the classification, while the generative model the data based on how the data was generated and to which distribution the data belongs to. Now, here is another difference. Naïve Bayes consider all the features to be independent and there is no multicollinearity and the features are not correlated. While the logistic regression works better even if the multicollinearity exists. So in Naïve Bayes classification, the word naive is used because there is a condition in order to apply the Naïve Bayes classification, and the condition is that this classifier assumes that all the features are independent. Independent means that there is no correlation between the feature and every feature is providing the separate information from the other feature. That is, all the features are independent and there is no correlation. So if the features are dependent or there is multicollinearity or the repetition between the feature, in that case, Naïve Bayes classifier will not perform very well. On the other hand, logistic regression will perform better even if the multicollinearity exists. The next is the Naïve Bayes has a higher bias and a low variance and hence provide a faster solution for less training samples, provided that the features are independent. On the other hand, logistic regression performance will be affected by less training sample. Since the Naïve Bayes has a higher bias, the Naïve Bayes classifier has a higher bias, therefore it performs well even if we have less training samples. On the other hand, the logistic regression performance will be affected by the less training sample. So these were the few points in order to compare the performance of a Naïve Bayes classification with the logistic regression. The most important thing is the Naïve Bayes is the generative classifier and it assumes that all the features are independent. On the other hand, the logistic regressor is the discriminative classifier. So I hope you understood the difference between those classifiers. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next lecture.